Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into the past. Not to a battlefield or a royal court, but right into the most intimate space of all. The bedroom. Or what passed for one in the Renaissance. Imagine, if you will, a grand hall. Maybe a roaring fireplace, casting dancing shadows on tapestries, and right there, in the middle of it all, stands a towering structure. It's not a fortress, though it certainly feels protective. It's your bed. And this isn't just any bed. It's a colossal, draped edifice, a microclimate of warmth and prestige, bristling with fabrics, and perhaps even needing a little step stool just to climb into its lofty embrace. You probably won't survive the night in comfort without one, let alone wake up feeling refreshed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling chatty, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a room that's not quite a room by modern standards. It's vast, echoing, and often shared with servants, family members, and even occasional livestock, depending on your social standing. The concept of a private bedroom as we know it simply didn't exist for most people. Instead, you had a bed. And that bed, especially for the wealthy, was a statement. The most striking feature, undeniably, would be the curtains. Not just flimsy drapes, mind you, but heavy, often voluminous hangings that enclosed the entire sleeping area. Why? Well, think about the cold. Renaissance architecture, while often beautiful, wasn't exactly known for its insulation. Stone walls, large, ill-fitting windows, and vast open spaces meant drafts were a constant companion. Your breath would literally mist in the air as you tried to doze off. These thick curtains, made of wool, velvet, or brocade, were your personal thermal barrier, trapping what little warmth your body, or a bed warmer filled with hot coals, could generate. It was like sleeping inside a giant, very fancy sleeping bag, but one that could also double as a fashion statement, beyond mere warmth. Though those curtains were a profound declaration of status, imagine walking into a great lord's chamber. Your gaze would immediately be drawn to the bed, often positioned prominently, perhaps on a dais. The richer the family, the more elaborate the hangings, talking intricate embroidery, rich dyes, perhaps even silver or gold thread woven. This wasn't just about keeping warm, it was about showing off. These textiles were incredibly expensive, often representing a significant portion of a family's wealth. To possess a bed with such lavish accoutrements was to broadcast your social standing to anyone who entered your living space. It was the ultimate flex of its time. Far more impactful than a modern supercar parked outside. Oh, you have a solid gold toilet? That's cute. I sleep in a velvet cocoon spun from the tears of 1,000 silkworms. Or so you might imagine them thinking. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for these bed curtains was comfort or display. It's a bit of a chicken or egg scenario, isn't it? Did the need for warmth necessitate the hangings, which then naturally became a canvas for demonstrating wealth? Or was the desire for ostentatious display so strong that practical considerations like warmth were a happy byproduct? What is clear is that the bed was a highly visible piece of furniture, and every element of it, from its construction to its coverings, was imbued with meaning. Consider the practicalities. Before the advent of central heating, or even effective room heating beyond a blazing hearth, drafts were a serious concern. Bed enclosed by heavy fabric created a microclimate, a pocket of air that could be warmed by body heat, shared with a bedmate or by a warming pan. It was less about keeping the entire room warm, and more about making the immediate sleeping zone tolerable. A quirky tidbit, some wealthier individuals even had small, brazier-like charcoal burners placed inside the curtained area carefully, monitored of course, to avoid setting the whole luxurious setup alight. Imagine the carbon monoxide risk. Talk about sleeping dangerously. This wasn't just about personal comfort. It was about survival in often drafty, unheated environments. You weren't just going to bed, you were retreating into a personal, portable, and surprisingly flammable fortress against the chill. From those simple, practical beginnings of curtains, you then witness the grand evolution. the four-poster bed, emerges. It's not just drapes hanging from the ceiling or from simple wall hooks anymore. No, this is a dedicated freestanding structure, often crafted from robust oak, walnut, or even fruit woods, intricately carved and sometimes even gilded. The posts themselves become works of art, reaching upwards, sometimes spiraling, sometimes fluted, supporting a massive tester or canopy above. This wasn't just about utility, it was about permanence, about making a statement that this bed, and by extension its owner, was here to stay. Think of it as the ultimate upgrade from a cozy but slightly flimsy blanket fort to a full-blown, custom-built treehouse. A treehouse, of course, where you sleep. The transition from simple bed hangings to these elaborate four-poster constructions wasn't sudden. It was a gradual development, influenced by evolving woodworking techniques, increasing affluence among the nobility and merchant class, and a growing desire for both comfort and display. Early versions might have had just two posts at the head, with the foot end simply supported by the wall or footboard. But as craftsmen gained mastery over joinery and carving, the full four-poster became the dominant form for the elite. These beds were often so tall, reaching nearly to the ceilings of the grand halls they occupied, that they began to necessitate additional features, which we'll get to shortly. It's almost as if the beds were trying to compete with the height of the grand cathedrals being built concurrently. "My bed is taller than your altar," might have been a subtle, unspoken boast. This architectural shift in bed design also reflected changing social dynamics. As wealth concentrated in fewer hands, those individuals sought more tangible ways to express their power and status. A massive, elaborately carved four-poster bed, adorned with the finest textiles, became a central piece in their domestic theater. It wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a throne of repose, a private sanctuary, even when situated in a very public space. You can imagine a modern-day CEO having their desk custom-built from rare woods. But back then, it was your bed that got the bespoke. Artisanal treatment, a quirky tidbit that illustrates the significance of these structures. Sometimes the canopy or tester of these beds would be built directly into the room's architecture, making them effectively permanent fixtures. Immovable and often passed down through generations, along with the house itself. This meant that if you moved, you didn't take your bed with you. You just got a new one, or, more accurately, the house already had one suitable for your station. Talk about built-in furniture. This also highlights how ingrained the bed was. Within the very fabric of the aristocratic dwelling, historians still argue whether the practical benefits of these massive structures, such as enhanced stability for the heavy drapes and improved enclosure, outweighed the sheer cost and effort involved in their construction and maintenance. Was it form following function, or function begrudgingly accommodating form? Perhaps it was a delightful dance between both, where increasing technical skill allowed for increasingly ambitious designs that then offered better comfort. Either way, the bed was no longer just a mattress on the floor. It was a carefully engineered piece of domestic architecture, a mini-building within a building, setting the stage for the next layer of complexity we'll explore. The weight of the hangings, often hundreds of pounds of velvet, silk and wool, necessitated a strong, rigid frame. The four posts provided that essential support, allowing for more elaborate and heavier textiles to be draped, swagged, and tied back with increasing complexity. Imagine trying to hang a full set of velvet drapes from a flimsy curtain rod. Just wouldn't work. These beds were designed to bear the weight of their own grandeur, and as they grew in size and elaboration, they naturally invited more elements, like those little benches, and yes, even stairs, which would soon become indispensable. You're essentially building a house for your sleep, complete with its own. Climate control those curtains, remember? In a rather impressive facade. Hey Janelle, let's talk about the very public nature of private life in the Renaissance, and how your grand bed, complete with its increasingly elaborate curtains, played a starring role in this surprising paradox. You see, the concept of a dedicated, private bedroom was largely a future invention. For most people, and especially for the nobility and wealthy merchants, life was lived in large, multifunctional spaces, the great hall, the parlor, or even a spacious chamber that served many purposes. And right there, often prominently displayed, was the bed. It wasn't hidden away. It was an integral part of the social landscape of the home. Imagine a busy medieval day in a lord's household. You might wake up in your magnificent bed still, nestled within its curtains, as servants are already bustling about, preparing breakfast, sweeping the rushes on the floor, or tending to the fire. Your advisors might arrive to discuss matters of state. Merchants could be waiting to present goods, and even visitors might be received. All while you are still, essentially, in bed. The drawn curtains transformed your sleeping space into a room within a room, a temporary, movable, and highly visible private sanctuary in the midst of public activity. It was a bit like having a very fancy, draped cubicle in the middle of a bustling open-plan office. Please, hold all calls and important discussions until I've had my morning gruel and emerged from my fabric fortress. This lack of strict separation between public and private was a fundamental aspect of Renaissance life. Privacy, as we understand it today, a personal space free from intrusion and observation, was a luxury, often an impossibility even for the most powerful. Instead, privacy was achieved through symbolic barriers, and the bed curtains were the ultimate expression of this. They offered a visual and psychological boundary, a permeable membrane between your personal self and the demands of the household. You could hear the hubbub of daily life just beyond the fabric, but you were, for all intents and purposes, unseen and unobserved within your cozy cocoon. A mainstream historical fact reinforcing this. Monarchs and high nobility would conduct court business, receive important visitors, and even hold formal meals while seated in or on their bed. This was not considered unusual or undignified. Rather, it emphasized their status and the bed's centrality to their existence. It was a power move, asserting authority from the very seat of their repose. Think of it. You're negotiating a treaty while still under your covers, occasionally peeking out like a very powerful, slightly sleepy groundhog. This also leads to a quirky tidbit. Some bed curtains were designed with small openings or peepholes, sometimes embroidered to look like decorative elements, allowing the occupant to discreetly observe what was happening in the room without fully revealing themselves. Imagine the subtle drama unfolding. You could be quietly judging the fashion choices of your visitors or listening in on whispered conversations, all from the comfort and supposed seclusion of your bed. It's like having a secret periscope built into your duvet, except it's made of velvet. Historians still argue whether these public beds truly offered privacy versus simply reinforcing social hierarchy. Was it a genuine attempt at creating personal space, or primarily a performance of power, a demonstration that one was so important that the world revolved around their bedchamber? Perhaps it was a clever combination of both, where the illusion of privacy was as important as its practical reality. What is clear is that the bed was a hub, a focal point, and its curtains were not just for warmth, but for weaving a complex tapestry of social interaction and personal refuge in a world that rarely offered true solitude. The very air within the curtained enclosure would have been different, warmer, perhaps smelling faintly of sleep and linen, a stark contrast to the often smoky, drafty, and fragrant, not always pleasantly atmosphere of the larger hall. You're not just retreating from the cold, you're retreating from the noise, the smells, and the constant gaze of others. It's your personal bubble, a pre-digital, pre-headphone sanctuary from the relentless demands of Renaissance communal living, the social fabric of the time, allowing for a curious blend of visibility and seclusion, given that the bed was so often a public stage for royalty. In high nobility, the bedchamber wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a theater of power, a backdrop for daily ceremonies that reinforced their status and authority. You weren't simply waking up, you were performing the ritual of awakening, often with an audience. It was like living in a reality TV show, but with much better costumes and considerably higher stakes. Consider the levee, formal waking up and couchy, the formal going to bed ceremonies. This, you're the king or queen. As dawn breaks, courtiers, nobles, and high-ranking servants would gather in your bedchamber. The heavy curtains would be ceremonially drawn back, revealing you perhaps still groggy, but expected to immediately embody regal composure. Ranks of nobility having the privilege of handing you specific garments, a shirt, a stocking, a shoe. Each item passed, each gesture made, was a carefully choreographed display of hierarchy and access. It was like getting ready for work, but with an entire supporting cast and a captive audience critiquing your bedhead. This wasn't merely about personal service. It was about privilege and proximity to power. To be present at the monarch's bedchamber rituals was a mark of immense favor, a symbol of one's standing within the court. The bed, therefore, wasn't just furniture. It was a prop, a centerpiece in the daily theatrical production of monarchy. The lavishness of the bed curtains, the quality of the bedding, and the intricate carvings of the posts all contributed to this spectacle, enhancing the grandeur of the stage. A mainstream historical fact: King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, perfected these rituals, making them an elaborate daily performance that solidified his absolute power and drew all attention to his person, even as he was getting out of bed. His bed, consequently, was one of the most magnificent pieces of furniture in all of Europe. A quirky tidbit related to these ceremonies: sometimes these rituals, or even share a light meal there. This was an extreme mark of intimacy and trust, an unparalleled honor. Imagine the gossip. Did you see who was allowed to share the king's morning toast? Scandalous. The bed, usually a symbol of private rest, became a crucible of social dynamics, a place where status was both displayed and subtly negotiated. It highlights just how fluid the boundaries between personal and public life were. Even for the most powerful individuals, historians still argue whether these elaborate rituals genuinely fostered loyalty and a sense of community among the courtiers, or if they primarily served as a means of control and a constant reminder of the monarch's supremacy. Was it about bonding, or simply about keeping everyone in their place, literally and figuratively? Regardless, these rituals underscore that the bed was far from a simple piece of furniture, and a witness to the daily ebb and flow of courtly life beyond royalty. Similar, though less elaborate, rituals played out in aristocratic and wealthy merchant households. Even if you weren't a king, your bed might still be where you received close family members, where important household decisions were made, or where you'd share intimate conversations with your spouse. The curtains provided the psychological boundary for these moments, a soft shield against the wider world. Even if that wider world was just the family dog snoring in the corner of the great hall, the sheer size and prominence of these beds meant they couldn't simply be ignored. They were central figures in the domestic landscape, dictating traffic flow and providing a natural focal point for interaction. The curtains, once again, were key to managing this interaction, allowing for moments of theatrical reveal or discreet withdrawal. You could emerge from your velvet cocoon to greet the day, or retreat into it for a moment of quiet contemplation. It was the ultimate multitasking furniture, serving as a bedroom, an office, and a stage, all rolled into one impressively draped package. Beyond the grandeur and social rituals, there were undeniably practical, even gritty, reasons why Renaissance beds were so enclosed: hygiene and pest control. This might not be the most glamorous aspect of historical bedding, but trust me, it was a very real concern. Forget thread counts and memory foam. Back then, you were more worried about the number of tiny, biting creatures sharing your sleep. It was less about luxury and more about survival in a world that hadn't quite figured out central heating or bug spray. Imagine a typical Renaissance household. Sanitation, by modern standards, was rudimentary at best. Open sewers, unemptied chamber, pots and animals freely wandering through living spaces were common sights. This created a paradise for various pests. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs were ubiquitous, thriving in the straw-filled mattresses and coarse linens, your elaborate bed curtains, those symbols of wealth and warmth. Also served as a surprisingly effective barrier against these unwelcome nocturnal visitors. They literally created a more enclosed, hopefully less accessible, environment for your vulnerable sleeping self. It was a bit like sleeping under a very fancy mosquito net, but one that was also trying to keep out airborne diseases. And let's be honest, The general stench of medieval life. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval and Renaissance homes were rarely cleaned to our current standards. Floors were often covered with rushes, which, while initially pleasant, quickly became a repository for spilled food, animal droppings, and general grime, attracting all manner of vermin. The elevated nature of the four-poster bed, combined with its encompassing curtains, offered a degree of separation from this unsanitary ground level. It kept you literally above the fray, away from the immediate breeding grounds of pests on the floor. It was a subtle, yet crucial, act of self-preservation in an age before widespread understanding of germ theory. And it wasn't just about creepy crawlies. The curtains also offered a measure of protection against drafts carrying bad air. The pervasive medieval concept of miasma, believed to be the cause of disease. While we now know that disease is caused by germs, not bad smells, the belief was very real. Sealing yourself off in a curtained bed was thought to protect you from the noxious fumes and vapors that were thought to carry plague, fever, and other ailments. It was like wearing a very ornate, full-body, unventilated face mask. A quirky tidbit. Some individuals would even burn aromatic herbs or sprinkle perfumed water inside their bed curtains to try and purify the air and ward off illness, adding another layer to the sensory experience of their enclosed sleeping space. Imagine waking up smelling faintly of lavender in desperation. Historians still argue whether the perceived health benefits of enclosing beds against miasma were genuinely a significant driver for their design, or simply a convenient post hoc rationalization for features primarily driven by warmth and status. Did people really believe they were warding off the plague with velvet, or was that just a nice bonus? Regardless, the prevailing medical theories of the time certainly supported the idea that an enclosed, purified space was healthier, making the bed curtains a form of early preventative medicine. The materials themselves also played a role in pest management. While not entirely immune, certain tightly woven fabrics, or those treated with particular dyes, might have been less hospitable to pests, and the sheer effort involved in cleaning and airing such massive hangings meant they likely weren't done very often, so the hope was that the enclosure would keep pests out rather than in. It was a closed system, ideally for your benefit. So, you might imagine kings and queens luxuriating in silken splendor. A part of their daily reality was undoubtedly dodging fleas and trying not to breathe in whatever bad air was floating around. The seemingly luxurious bed curtains were, in many ways, a testament to the less glamorous realities of life in the Renaissance. A blend of aspirational display and down-to-earth, rather itchy practicality you weren't just getting into bed. You were entering your personal, velvet-lined fortress against the invisible and sometimes all too visible threats of the medieval world. The enclosed, private nature of the Renaissance bed also meant it became an essential space for illness and confinement. When sickness struck, your magnificent bed transformed from a symbol of status and comfort into a practical sick room, a place of isolation, care, and sometimes, regrettably, the final farewell. You weren't just taking to your bed, you were entering a contained medical ward, a place where life and death played out with a unique intimacy. In an era without hospitals as we know them, and with rudimentary medical knowledge, the home was the primary place for the sick, and within the home, the bed, particularly the grand curtained bed of the wealthy, offered the best available environment for a patient. The heavy curtains, which we've already discussed as barriers against cold and pests, now served a crucial new purpose: isolating the sick individual. This was a proto-quarantine, an attempt to prevent the spread of contagion within the household, even if the understanding of how diseases spread was imperfect. It was like having your own personal isolation booth, albeit one that looked like it belonged in a castle. A mainstream historical fact. During outbreaks of plague or other highly contagious diseases, entire households might isolate themselves, and the sick members would be confined to their beds, their curtains drawn tight, minimizing contact with others. This was a desperate but often necessary measure to try and contain the spread, even if it meant significant suffering for the isolated individual. The bed became a microcosm of the larger struggle against illness, a battleground where life literally hung in the balance. Beyond mere isolation, the bed provided a stable, stationary platform for care. Attendants could easily access the patient, administer remedies, bring food and drink, and provide basic nursing. The curtains also offered a measure of dignity and privacy for the ailing individual, allowing them to suffer or recover away from the constant gaze of the rest of the household. It wasn't exactly a hospital bed with adjustable features, but it was the best you could get. A quirky tidbit that underscores the bed's role in illness. Some inventories from the period mention specific sickbed, sets of linens, and simpler curtains, suggesting that even the most opulent households kept less valuable, more easily washable fabrics specifically for use during illness. Imagine having a designated plague duvet. This hints at a practical recognition of the need for separate, more hygienic arrangements when disease was present, even if their methods were limited. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the constant threat of illness and the ways people adapted their living spaces to cope. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of being confined to such a bed during a long illness. Was the enclosure comforting, a secure womb against the world? Or was it suffocating, a constant reminder of one's vulnerability and isolation? It likely varied greatly depending on the individual and the severity of their illness. What is clear is that the bed was often the final resting place, a witness to death itself. Last rites were performed beside or even within the curtained bed, and wills were often dictated from them. The bed was not just where life began or was rejuvenated. It was frequently where it ended, holding a profound, solemn significance. So, your grand Renaissance bed, with its luxurious drapes and imposing structure, carried a dual nature. It was a symbol of life, power, and social connection, but also a stark reminder of mortality, a place where illness confined, isolated, and ultimately sometimes claimed its victims. It served as a domestic infirmary, a place of profound human experience, from the deepest suffering to the quiet moments of hope for recovery. It truly was a piece of furniture that saw it all, from the grand theatrical performances of courtly life to the most intimate and vulnerable moments of human existence. From the public performance of power and the grim realities of illness. Now witness a significant gradual shift that would forever change the way we live: the rise of the bedroom. This wasn't an overnight revolution, but a slow, evolving process where the bed, once a centerpiece of communal living, began its journey towards becoming the focal point of a dedicated private sleeping chamber. It's like your personal space, slowly but surely expanding from a small corner of the living room to its own dedicated wing of the house. Finally, some peace and quiet. This transition was largely driven by changing architectural practices, increasing prosperity, and a growing desire for personal privacy among the wealthier classes. As the Renaissance progressed, particularly into the late 15th and 16th centuries, new homes and remodels began to incorporate more specialized rooms. Instead of just a great hall and a few general chambers, floor plans started including smaller, more intimate spaces, studies, retiring rooms, and, crucially, specific bedchambers or cabinets. This meant that your magnificent curtained bed no longer had to share its space with banquets, business meetings, or even barnyard animals. It finally got its own room. A mainstream historical fact: the development of the corridor in domestic architecture played a pivotal role in creating more private spaces. Previously, rooms often led directly into one another, meaning you had to pass through someone else's space to get to your own. Corridors provided independent access to individual rooms, effectively unlocking the potential for true privacy. Suddenly, your bedchamber wasn't a thoroughfare, it was a destination, and you could close the door behind you. Imagine the relief. No more unexpected visitors while you're still in your nightcap. This new architectural layout allowed for a fundamental shift in how the bed was perceived and used. While still grand and often elaborately curtained, its primary function could now truly become rest and intimacy, rather than also serving as a public throne or a makeshift clinic. The curtains, of course, remained still, offering warmth and a sense of enclosure, but their role in mediating public interaction became less pronounced. They were now more purely about creating a cozy, secure sleeping environment, rather than a performative one. A quirky tidbit that reflects this evolving sense of privacy. During this period, even the concept of private correspondence began to flourish. People sought secluded spaces to read and write letters, and the newly private bedchamber often served this purpose. You might find a small writing desk tucked into a corner, or even a book resting on the bedside bench, indicating that these rooms were not just for sleeping, but for personal reflection and quiet pursuits. It was the original "do not disturb" sign, except it was the whole room. Historians still argue about the precise timeline and motivations behind this shift towards greater domestic privacy. Was it a direct response to the perceived lack of personal space in earlier communal living, or a consequence of increased wealth allowing for larger, more specialized dwellings? It's likely a combination, with the desire for personal space growing as the means to achieve it became available. This period laid the groundwork for the modern concept of the home as a collection of distinct, functional rooms, each with its own purpose. The dedicated bedroom meant that the lavishness of the bed itself could be indulged without needing to serve multiple, contradictory functions. The curtains could be even more luxurious, the carvings more intricate, because the bed was now the undisputed king of its own private castle. This shift also began to influence other furniture, chests and armoires, once perhaps scattered throughout. A great hall could now find permanent homes within the bedchamber, further enhancing its function as a private sanctuary for clothing and personal belongings. Your Renaissance bedroom was slowly but surely becoming the ancestor of your own cozy, private retreat, a place where you could genuinely dim the lights and ease into tonight's journey without fear of unexpected guests. As the Renaissance progressed, and beds became increasingly elaborate and moved into more private spaces, they also became subject to the fascinating and often frustrating realm of sumptuary laws. These were laws passed by authorities, from monarchs to city councils, designed to regulate consumption and dictate what people could wear, eat, and own, based on their social status or income. And yes, your magnificent curtained bed was definitely on the list. It was basically the government telling you, no, Brenda, you cannot have those fabulous velvet drapes if you're only a merchant's wife. Stick to linen. The primary motivation behind sumptuary laws was to maintain social order and prevent excessive display of wealth by those considered lower in the social hierarchy. If a newly rich merchant could afford a bed as grand as a duke's, it blurred the lines of status, potentially causing social instability. These laws aimed to preserve clear distinctions between classes, ensuring that everyone knew their place. It was the ultimate top-down attempt at social engineering through interior design. Imagine the snooty looks if you accidentally violated one. "Excuse me, is that real gold thread on your canopy? 'Cause I don't recall you being royalty." A mainstream historical fact. Sumptuary laws were particularly prevalent during the Renaissance due to the rapid growth of a wealthy merchant class who often amassed fortunes comparable to, or even exceeding, those of traditional nobility. This new money challenged established hierarchies, leading the aristocracy to push for laws that limited displays of wealth in areas like clothing and home furnishings, specifically to differentiate themselves. Your bed, therefore, wasn't just furniture. It was a battleground in the war of social status. These laws often specified not only the materials that could be used for bed, hangings, for example, silk, velvet, brocade versus wool or linen, but also the quantity and quality of embroidery, the presence of precious metals like gold or silver thread, and even the types of carved ornamentation on the bed frame itself. For example, a minor noble might be permitted to have a certain amount of embroidery, but only a duke could commission a bed adorned with solid gold leaf. Breaking these laws could result in fines, confiscation of goods, or even public humiliation. It's like getting a ticket for having too much swagger in your sleeping arrangements. A quirky tidbit: some clever individuals would find loopholes in these laws. For instance, if a law restricted the use of certain expensive dyes for clothing, they might still use them for bed hangings, as the laws were often hyper-specific. Or they might use cheaper materials but employ incredibly intricate craftsmanship to give the illusion of luxury without technically violating the material restrictions. It was a subtle form of sartorial and domestic rebellion, trying to flaunt wealth without getting caught. It's not gold, it's just ... It's very shiny yellow thread. Totally different. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of sumptuary laws. While they might have provided a temporary break on ostentatious display, human ingenuity and the desire for status often found ways around them, or simply led to a focus on forms of luxury not covered by the statutes. Did they truly maintain social order, or just create a more nuanced and sometimes ridiculous game of keeping up with the Joneses? Regardless, they highlight just how much significance was attached to the visual presentation of wealth, and how centrally the bed figured in that display. So, while you dreamt peacefully within your elaborate bed curtains, somewhere, a city official might have been poring over a list, wondering if your brocade was a shade too rich, or if that carved lion on your bedpost was a little too ostentatious for your station. Your bed was not just a personal refuge, it was a public declaration, subject to the whims and dictates of social control. A piece of furniture caught in the crossfire of class distinction and aspirational display, and in its very structure and adornment, it told a story not just of comfort, but of hierarchy and the constant, sometimes absurd, battle for social standing. Beyond their practical uses and their entanglement with social regulations, the fabrics and colors of Renaissance bed hangings carried deep symbolism. This wasn't just about choosing what looked nice. Every hue, every pattern, every type of material communicated a message, reflecting the values, beliefs, and aspirations of the owner. You weren't just decorating your bed. You were weaving a narrative, a silent story told through thread and dye. It was like wearing your heart on your sleeve, but your entire philosophy on your bed. Colors, in particular, held significant meaning. Red, often seen in deep crimson or vibrant scarlet, symbolized power, royalty, and passion. It was an expensive dye to produce, making it a natural choice for the beds of the elite, broadcasting their wealth and authority. Blue derived from costly lapis lazuli, or woad, often represented loyalty, truth, and divinity. A favorite for beds in religious households or those aspiring to piety. Green, associated with nature, renewal, and hope, might be used in spring or to signify fertility. Even simpler colors, like white, representing purity, or black, symbolizing mourning or sobriety, found their place. Your bed, therefore, could change its mood with the seasons, or reflect a particular event, like a wedding or a funeral. AMANSTREAM. Historical fact. The dyes used to achieve these vibrant colors were often derived from rare and expensive sources, making colored fabrics a luxury in themselves. For example, true crimson came from cochineal insects, a valuable commodity imported from distant lands. The very act of having richly colored bed hangings was an advertisement of your access to global trade networks and your substantial financial resources. It wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about economics and geopolitics, all draped over your sleeping space. The materials themselves also spoke volumes. Velvet, with its plush pile and shimmering surface, was the epitome of luxury, difficult and costly to produce. Silk, imported from the East, represented exoticism and extreme wealth. Brocade, with its raised woven patterns often incorporating metallic threads, screamed opulence and intricate craftsmanship. Wool, while more common, could still be luxurious in its finest, most densely woven forms. The choice of fabric was a deliberate, calculated decision, revealing as much about the owner as their coat of arms. A quirky tidbit, some bed hangings were so grand and intricately embroidered that they would feature entire narrative scenes from mythology, history, or biblical stories. Imagine falling asleep under a tapestry depicting the Trojan War or the creation story. These weren't just decorative, they were educational and inspirational, turning your bed into a vast, soft, personal art gallery. You could literally drift off to sleep surrounded by epic tales. Tonight, I'll dream of Achilles, ... Or maybe just a comfortable nap, historians still argue about the extent to which these symbolic meanings were consciously understood and interpreted by everyone, or if they were more of a subtle, unspoken language among the elite. Did the average servant understand the precise shade of blue on their lord's bed signified divine favor? Or did they just think, wow, that's a lot of expensive blue fabric? Regardless, the intention to communicate through these choices was, undoubtedly, they're making the bed a richly coded object in the Renaissance home. So, when you gazed upon a Renaissance bed, you weren't just seeing a place of rest. You were reading a visual dictionary of power, piety, prosperity, and personal aspiration. The rustle of its curtains, the glint of its gold thread, the depth of its crimson hue, all these elements combined to tell a story. Your Renaissance bed was a magnificent, multi-layered canvas, where every stitch, every fiber, and every color was a deliberate choice, intended to convey meaning and cement your place in the intricate tapestry of society. Now let's turn our attention to one of those peculiar yet utterly practical accessories that often accompany these grand Renaissance beds: the little bench's purpose. You might see it called a chevet, or a bedside stool, and while it might seem insignificant next to the towering four-poster, it played a crucial role in the daily rituals and practicalities of bed-centric life. It was like the humble, unsung hero of the bedroom, making life just a little bit easier for the bed's lofty occupants. First and foremost, its most obvious function was as a simple seat. Imagine trying to get into one of those colossal beds without a bit of assistance. These beds were often so high off the ground, sometimes 2 or 3 feet, not including the mattress, that they were almost akin to climbing into a small stage. A small bench or stool provided a convenient step-up, making entry and exit a much more graceful affair. Think of it as a built-in step for your personal sleeping mountain. No more awkward leaps or precarious balancing acts just to reach your pillow, but its utility extended far beyond just a simple step. This little bench was also a versatile piece of temporary storage. Before the ubiquitous nightstand, where would you put your book, your reading glasses if you had them, a glass of water, or a small candle? The bedside bench served as a convenient surface for these personal items. It kept essentials within easy reach, transforming the area immediately around the bed into a functional mini-hub. You could even imagine it holding a small, valuable personal item like a jewelry box, if you were feeling particularly trusting. A mainstream historical fact, these bedside benches or stools were often quite simple in design, usually plain wood. Contrasting with the elaborate carvings and opulent fabrics of the bed itself, this functional simplicity highlights their utilitarian purpose, serving the bed rather than competing with it for attention. They were the reliable, unglamorous workhorses of the bedchamber, always there when you needed them. Moreover, the little bench played a role in the social rituals we discussed earlier. During the formal levee or couchy ceremonies, attendants or particularly favored individuals might sit on this bench while assisting the noble occupant. It provided a designated, respectful spot for those attending to the lord or lady, allowing them to perform their duties without awkwardly standing or kneeling for extended periods. It was a subtle nod to comfort. Even in the midst of rigid courtly etiquette, a quirky tidbit. Sometimes these benches might have a small, hidden compartment built into them, a secret drawer or a lift-top lid. This could be used for discreet storage of personal valuables, important documents, or even a weapon for self-defense during the night. It adds a layer of quiet intrigue to the seemingly innocuous furniture piece. Imagine stashing your precious jewels or a concealed dagger just inches from where you sleep. Oh, this old bench, just for sitting. Definitely no hidden secrets. Historians still argue about the precise design and commonality of these benches. Were they always custom-made for the bed or often repurposed household stools? Their simplicity means fewer detailed descriptions and inventories, making their exact forms a subject of ongoing study. However, their consistent appearance in illuminated manuscripts and domestic scenes suggests they were an indispensable part of the bedchamber setup. So, while the curtains screamed status and the posts declared grandeur, the little bench quietly whispered convenience. It was a testament to the practical needs of daily life, making the towering Renaissance bed not just a beautiful showpiece, but a genuinely usable space. It ensured that, despite all the pomp and circumstance, you could still gracefully ascend to your sleeping sanctuary and have your favorite book, or perhaps a hidden snack right within arm's reach. Speaking of gracefully ascending to your sleeping sanctuary, let's address the most visually striking solution to the towering height of Renaissance beds: stairs. Yes, in many grand households, the bed wasn't just climbed into, it was approached via a set of dedicated steps. These weren't just purely functional additions. They were often beautifully crafted, reflecting both practicality and the unwavering desire for grandeur. You weren't just going to bed, we're making an entrance, or perhaps a vertical journey to dreamland. As beds grew higher to escape floor drafts, pests, and to accommodate thicker mattresses for comfort and more elaborate underbed storage, which we'll get to, simply having a small stool wasn't always sufficient. Imagine trying to navigate a 3-foot leap onto a soft, unstable mattress, especially in the middle of the night. Perhaps after a few too many goblets of Renaissance wine? Not ideal. Dedicated stairs, often just 2 or 3 steps, offered a far safer and more dignified ascent. It was like having your own personal boarding ramp for your sleeping vessel. These steps could range from simple, unadorned wooden constructions to elaborately carved pieces, sometimes even upholstered too. Match the bed curtains. For the most opulent beds, the stairs themselves became part of the overall display of wealth and status. A mainstream historical fact, some royal beds were so high that they were almost like mini platforms, requiring a fixed set of steps or even a small movable staircase. This allowed attendants to easily make the bed, change linens, or assist the occupant, all while maintaining their own dignity and avoiding awkward acrobatics. The presence of stairs further underscores the bed's transformation from a simple sleeping spot to a major piece of domestic architecture. It indicates a level of permanence and importance that few other pieces of furniture could claim. You don't build stairs to a temporary structure. This was built to last, designed to impress, and intended to be a central feature of the chamber. For generations, a quirky tidbit. Some of these bed steps even had small, hidden drawers or compartments built into them, similar to the bedside benches. These could be used for discreet storage of nightclothes, slippers, or other personal items, adding another layer of practical utility to an already multifunctional piece. Imagine kicking off your slippers and tucking them away into the very step you just used to climb into bed. Efficient. Historians still argue about the exact prevalence of dedicated bed stairs versus simple stools or benches. Were they only for the absolute wealthiest, or did they become more common in moderately prosperous homes as well? The evidence often comes from visual depictions in art and occasional mentions in inventories, which don't always capture the full range of household items. However, their existence clearly points to a continuous effort to make the elaborate Renaissance bed not just a symbol, but a highly functional and accessible piece of furniture. So, when you picture a Renaissance bed, don't just think of curtains and posts. Add those elegant, sometimes hidden steps. They were a testament to ingenious design, a blend of necessity and luxury, ensuring that even the most exalted slumber could be attained with grace and safety. They quite literally elevated the act of going to bed, turning a nightly routine into a small, dignified ritual, a mini climb to the heights of comfort and repose. And let's be honest, they probably saved a lot of sleepy nobles from very undignified tumbles. Beyond their primary function as a place of rest and their additional roles and status, privacy, hygiene, and comfort, Renaissance beds also served a crucial practical purpose: storage and hidden compartments. These magnificent pieces of furniture were often more than just a place to sleep. They were cleverly designed solutions for stowing valuables, linens, and personal belongings in an age where dedicated closets and secure safes were still uncommon. Your bed wasn't just where you laid your head, it was your personal bank vault and linen closet, all rolled into one impressively large package. Think about the sheer size of these beds. particularly the four posters with their elevated platforms. The space beneath the mattress and within the large wooden frame was ripe for utilization. This could take various forms: large built-in drawers at the base of the bed, lift-up panels on the sides or footboard revealing cavernous storage areas, or even simply enough space underneath the high frame to slide in large chests or coffers. This was invaluable in homes that lacked ample built-in storage. Where else would you keep your winter furs, your precious silks, or your family documents? Under the bed, of course. A mainstream historical fact: inventories from noble and wealthy merchant households frequently list specific items stored in the bed or under the bed. This included not only spare linens, blankets, and pillows, but also more valuable items, like clothing, documents, and sometimes even money or small pieces of jewelry. The bed, being the largest piece of furniture and often the most secure, especially with its occupant sleeping directly above, was a logical place to keep important possessions safe from theft or damage. It was the original out of sight, out of mind security system, with you literally being the alarm. The curtains, once again, played a supporting role here. When drawn, they effectively concealed any storage compartments, adding an extra layer of discretion. No one would easily know what treasures might be tucked away beneath your mattress or behind a decorative panel on the bed frame. It added to the aura of the bed as a private, secure sanctuary, a quirky tidbit that takes this even further. Some beds, particularly those in potentially dangerous or uncertain times, were designed with elaborate hidden compartments, accessible only through secret mechanisms. A false panel, a disguised lever, or even a specific sequence of pushes and pulls on the carvings could reveal a hidden drawer or safe within the bed frame itself. Imagine being a Renaissance spy, and your most secret documents are literally beneath your pillow. The code is in the bed, but you'll have to find the trick latch, which is disguised as a sleeping cherub's ear. Historians still argue about the extent to which these hidden compartments were genuinely for security versus being a display of clever craftsmanship or novelty. Were they truly effective deterrents against thieves, or just a fun feature for the owner? Regardless, the very existence of such features demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of joinery and a desire to maximize utility from every piece of furniture, especially one as central as the bed. So your Renaissance bed wasn't just a place for rest and show. It was a remarkably efficient and often ingenious piece of multifunctional furniture, acting as your personal storage unit and security box. From the mundane, like spare blankets, to the precious, like family heirlooms, your bed kept your worldly possessions close and safe, embodying a practical ingenuity that extended far beyond its immediate function as a place of slumber. It was the ultimate all-in-one domestic solution, proving that sometimes the best place to hide something is right out in the open, or rather, right under your nose. To truly understand the Renaissance bed, we can't just rely on written accounts. We need to look at the visual evidence. This is where artistic depictions and evidence from the period become invaluable. Paintings, illuminated manuscripts, and even architectural drawings offer us a rich, immediate window into how these beds looked, how they were used, and what they symbolized in daily life. It's like having a carefully curated Instagram feed from the 15th century, showing off the ultimate hashtag bedroom goals of the era. When you examine these historical artworks, certain patterns emerge. You consistently see the towering height of the beds, often necessitating steps or stools. The heavy, elaborate curtains are almost always present, sometimes drawn tight, sometimes elegantly tied back to reveal the occupant or the interior. You'll notice the intricate carvings on the bedposts and canopies, reflecting the prevailing artistic styles of the time. From Gothic linearity to nascent Renaissance flourishes, these aren't just background props. They're often central, detailed elements, indicating their importance, a mainstream historical fact. Many religious paintings from the Renaissance depict scenes like the Annunciation or the Nativity, where the Virgin Mary or Christ Child is shown in a bed that closely resembles contemporary domestic furniture. This practice made the sacred relatable to the viewer, placing holy events within a familiar everyday setting, incidentally providing valuable insight into the appearance of real beds. So even divine encounters happened in a curtained bed. Just like yours, well, almost beyond religious art.
Secular paintings and miniatures often show domestic scenes, portraits of individuals in their private chambers, or even illustrations for inventories and legal documents.
These provide detailed, sometimes almost photographic, glimpses of the beds. Their accompanying furnishings, like the little benches, and the activities that took place around them. You can see how servants interacted with the bed, how nobles received visitors there, and even the type of bedding used. A quirky tidbit, sometimes. These artistic depictions can reveal practical details that written records might omit. For instance, an illuminated manuscript might show a servant using a specific tool to clean under the high bed, or the precise way the curtains were looped back during the day. These small, incidental details, often overlooked by the artist focusing on the main subject, become invaluable clues for modern historians, offering a tangible sense of the everyday realities surrounding these grand beds. It's like finding a hidden Easter egg in an old video game that suddenly explains everything. Historians still argue about the degree of artistic license taken in these depictions. While they are incredibly informative, were artists always aiming for perfect realism, or did they sometimes exaggerate features for symbolic effect or aesthetic appeal? It's a constant challenge to balance the artistic representation with the archaeological and textual evidence. However, by comparing multiple sources, consistent picture of the Renaissance bed and its features definitely emerges. So, when you see an old painting with a grand bed in it, don't just glance past it. Lean in closer. Observe the fabric, the carvings, the steps, the subtle ways the curtains are arranged. Each detail is a brushstroke in a larger historical portrait, offering insights into a world where the bed was more than furniture. It was a microcosm of Renaissance life, meticulously captured for posterity by the artists of the age. They laid it all out for us, quite literally on canvas and vellum, giving us a visual storybook of slumber. As the Renaissance gave way to new artistic and social movements, particularly the Baroque and Rococo periods, the era of the grand curtained bed began its slow but inevitable decline. It wasn't a sudden disappearance, but a gradual shift in architectural tastes, furniture design, and evolving notions of comfort and privacy. Your once fashionable fabric-enclosed sleeping fortress started to look a bit, well, stuffy. The primary driver for this decline was a change in architectural priorities. As glass manufacturing improved, windows became larger and more efficient at letting in light and retaining heat. Houses became better insulated, and heating methods evolved beyond just open hearths, reducing the need for heavy draft-blocking bed curtains. Why seal yourself off in a fabric box when the entire room can be comfortably warm and brightly lit? It was like finally getting air conditioning and realizing you don't need 100 blankets anymore. A mainstream historical fact, the increasing prevalence of smaller, dedicated bedrooms also contributed to the decline of the enormous public-facing bed. As privacy became more valued, the need for the bed itself to act as a room within a room diminished. The bed could now be a simpler, more streamlined piece of furniture, designed purely for sleeping, rather than for multifunctional display and protection. The curtains, if they remained, became lighter, more decorative, and less about hermetically sealing you in. The aesthetic preferences also shifted. The heavy, dark, and often somber tones of Renaissance furniture and textiles were gradually replaced by the lighter, more airy, and curvilinear forms of the Baroque and Rococo. The rigid, box-like structure of the four-poster with its heavy drapes seemed too severe, too old-fashioned. Instead, designers favored beds with less prominent canopies, often with elegant, sweeping drapes that were more decorative than functional, or even beds without canopies at all, allowing more light and air to circulate. It was like trading a medieval armored knight for a graceful, dancing courtier, a quirky tidbit that illustrates this shift. Some beds of the later period still retained the four-poster structure, but did away with the heavy curtains entirely, replacing them with light silk swags, or simply leaving the posts bare as decorative elements. Others incorporated painted ceilings above the bed, creating the illusion of a canopy without the bulk of fabric. It was a clever way to keep the grandeur, while embracing the new, lighter aesthetic. We still have the posts, darling, but now you can actually see them. Historians still argue about the precise moment when the grand curtain bed truly lost its dominance. Was it a gradual fading, or were there specific design innovations that accelerated its demise? It's likely a complex interplay of evolving technology, changing social customs, and shifting artistic trends, all nudging the bed towards a simpler, more purely functional form. The desire for light and air, previously a luxury, became a design imperative. So, your once all-encompassing, heavily curtained Renaissance bed slowly gave way to a new era. It shed its weighty drapes, lowered its towering frame, and became less of a private fortress and more of a comfortable, elegant piece of furniture. It was a testament to how human needs and desires, driven by innovation and changing tastes, to continually reshape even the most fundamental aspects of our domestic lives, signaling the end of an era for the bed as a truly multifunctional, semi-public stage. So, as we bring our journey to a close, let's reflect on the incredible legacy of these Renaissance beds and how their innovations, born out of necessity and a yearning for status, continue to shape our modern comforts. You might not have velvet curtains to ward off imaginary miasma or require steps to climb into your bed, but the core ideas that define those elaborate structures still echo in your cozy bedroom tonight. It's truly amazing how a piece of furniture from centuries ago still influences where you lay your head. Think about it. The desire for warmth and insulation first drove the need for those heavy curtains. While we now have central heating, the concept of a comfortable, controlled sleeping environment persists. Your duvet, your climate-controlled room, even your electric blanket, they're all modern iterations of that primal need to be warm and protected during sleep. You still crave that microclimate, just without the risk of a charcoal brazier, setting our canopy ablaze, the pursuit of privacy that led to the development of dedicated bedchambers, and initially, those enclosing curtains, is perhaps the most enduring legacy. Your bedroom today is your undisputed sanctuary, space where you can retreat from the world, be truly yourself, and enjoy solitude. It's a fundamental idea of a private sleeping space, separate from the public areas of the home, began its strong emergence in the Renaissance. No more negotiating treaties in your nightshirt unless you're a very unusual remote worker. The emphasis on the bed as a symbol of status and personal expression also continues, albeit in different forms. While sumptuary laws are thankfully gone, we still invest emotionally and financially in our beds. The quality of your mattress, the design of your headboard, the luxury of your linens. These are all subtle ways we express our personal style and perceived comfort. Your bed might not be a gilded throne, but it's still a reflection of your taste and priorities. AMA, NSTREAM, historical fact that highlights this continuity. The standard modern bed frame, with a headboard and footboard, even without a full canopy, is a direct descendant of the early four-poster, stripped down to its essential structural elements. The very shape and elevation of many contemporary beds retain a memory of their grand Renaissance ancestors, even as they've become more minimalist. And what about those little benches and stairs? While you likely don't need steps to get into your modern bed, unless you're really into platform beds, the idea of convenience and accessibility around the sleeping area remains crucial. Your bedside table, with its lamp, phone charger, and water glass, is the modern equivalent of that. Humble chevet. It's all about keeping essentials within arm's reach for maximum nighttime comfort and ease. A quirky tidbit. The very act of making the bed is a ritual passed down from these grand Renaissance setups. While they had elaborate processes involving many layers and attendants, the concept of tidying and presenting the bed for the day or night, creating an inviting space, remains. You're part of a long lineage of bedmakers, stretching back to those who wrestled with heavy velvet drapes and mountains of straw. Historians still argue whether the functional improvements or the symbolic grandeur of the Renaissance bed had a greater impact on its long-term evolution. Was it the practical solutions to cold and pests, that truly propelled its design forward, or the relentless human desire for display and status? It's a fascinating chicken or egg question that underscores the complex interplay of utility and aspiration in shaping our material world. So, as you settle into your own bed tonight, consider its long, rich history. From a shared, drafty hall to a private, enclosed sanctuary. The bed has witnessed centuries of human life, evolving and adapting, but always retaining its fundamental role as a place of rest, dreams, and personal refuge. Its journey from a practical necessity to a symbol of luxury and privacy is a quiet testament to how even the simplest aspects of our daily lives are woven into the vast tapestry of history. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Sweet dreams.